Welcome to the DVERT Brief. I'm Dr. Meg McBride, Director of the Domestic Violent Extremism Research and Translation Center at CNA. This podcast series highlights new research, trends, and findings on violent extremism in America. Designed for policymakers, practitioners, and anyone curious about the evolving domestic threat landscape, this AI-generated podcast delivers concise and accessible summaries of our latest work. Thanks for listening.
In today's episode, we'll be exploring key insights from our report BTAM, Barriers to Continuity of Care. Let's dive in.
Sure. So first off, BTAM, that's Behavioral Threat Assessment and Management. It's fundamentally a community effort, multidisciplinary. You've got law enforcement, schools, social services, healthcare, all working together. The idea is to identify, assess, and then manage potential threats of violence using all those different viewpoints.
Right, bringing everyone to the table. But what's interesting and maybe a bit concerning is that the report points out this central challenge, despite being collaborative, actually ensuring continuity of care, keeping that communication flowing for sharing info, following up, holding folks accountable. It's surprisingly tough. The report flags 5 main areas where this continuity tends to break down. Let's look at the first one. It starts when a student simply transfers schools. You'd assume critical information just goes with them, wouldn't you?
You would think so, but schools often aren't obligated to share the threat assessment details or even reach out proactively to the new school. And it gets more complex because different districts or especially different states might use totally different assessment methods and procedures.
That's a key point. You mentioned states.
Yeah, the report notes that, look, professional relationships might help locally within a county maybe, but if a student moves across state lines, it's apparently exceedingly unlikely anyone at the old school knows someone at the new one. And that really ups the risk that a student just won't get the support they need. They can kind of disappear from view.
That really does highlight a major vulnerability. Okay, so what about when students aren't transferring but leaving the K-12 system altogether? Like graduation or maybe expulsion?
That's the second big barrier the report identified. Once a student graduates from school, gets expelled, or even just leaves, well, the school's legal responsibility, their power to follow up, it basically evaporates.
So the responsibility shifts.
It shifts entirely to the parents usually. And then once that young person turns 18, there's often no single entity tasked with monitoring their engagement with services or, assessing if they're still a threat. Unless there's a really strong community-level BTAM team already involved and ready to pick that up.
There's a quote in the report about that, isn't there?
Yes, it's quite impactful. A stakeholder said, "We were able to watch from a distance. Then he turned 18. It just perfectly captures how someone can fall out of the system right at that crucial transition."
Wow. And the challenges continue, it seems, even into higher education. The third barrier, the transition from high school to college.
Exactly. Colleges usually only get notified about actual criminal convictions. So if a case didn't rise to that level, even if there were serious concerns, that information likely doesn't follow. And again, if the college is out of state, the chances of that transfer happening are even lower.
So it relies on proactive outreach.
Pretty much. There's another quote. "Unless we're reaching out, I don't typically get calls or notices from high schools, whether it be here in Ohio or across the country. It shows that the default is often silence."
Okay. So beyond these big institutional handoffs, what about when someone is getting help? The fourth barrier seems to be about non-compliance with treatment.
That's right. The report found that mental health providers often don't have a standard way to tell the BTAM team if someone stops showing up or following the plan. A school might not find out about non-compliance for a month, maybe more. And on top of that, parents might not give the permission that's necessary for information sharing.
So what can providers share without consent?
Well, that's the critical part. Without that specific consent, providers can generally only break confidentiality and inform the school if they believe there's an imminent threat of serious harm. That's a very high threshold. It leaves this significant gap for situations that are concerning, but maybe not deemed immediately dangerous.
A real gray area. What's the last friction point?
The last friction point is aging out of pediatric services. There's often poor coordination between child and adult mental health systems. They might have totally separate providers, different locations, different record systems, leading to new adult providers potentially having very little background on the individual's history. That makes effective support and case management really difficult, especially if the person still poses some level of risk.
Okay, so we've walked through these 5 key breakdown points. When you look at them together, what's the deeper message here about how our systems handle these transitions? And what does it mean for actually preventing violence?
I think the main takeaway is that while school-based BTAM is crucial, it's not enough on its own. You absolutely need a community-based BTAM structure for that longer-term management for both youth and adults. Critically, the report argues this community team should be involved or at least informed in all significant cases right from the start. That way, they're positioned to handle these transitions and ensure information doesn't get lost.
So it's about building that bridge beyond the school walls from the outset.
Exactly. And the second big implication follows from that. Schools need better protocols for sharing threat assessment records, meaning when students transfer or graduate and head to college, a summary of the assessment should ideally go with their academic record.
What should be in that summary?
The report suggests a few key things: the date of the assessment, the specific behavior that caused concern, the outcome, and any safety or treatment plan details. Now, obviously, that's sensitive information, but the argument is that sharing it is vital for the receiving school or institution to make informed decisions. Decisions that protect both the student needing support and the wider community.
It definitely raises that tough question, doesn't it? How do we balance individual privacy with the collective need for safety, especially during these vulnerable transition periods? This report really highlights how, even with the best intentions, our systems can have these critical gaps, particularly when people move between different settings or stages of life. It leaves us thinking, how can we foster deeper trust-based relationships, more formalized information-sharing protocols across institutions, not just relying on chance encounters or informal networks to ensure no one falls through the cracks? This podcast was produced with the assistance of artificial intelligence tools, but the content was based on research done by the DVERT Center, which is housed within CNA, a nonprofit research and analysis organization dedicated to advancing the safety and security of the nation. The research on which this podcast is based was supported by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate. Adaptation of this research for the DVERT Brief was supported by the National Institute of Justice. The views and conclusions contained in this podcast are those of the authors and should not be interpreted as necessarily representing the official policies, either expressed or implied, of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security or the National Institute of Justice.